Hey, it's Eric Johanson, and I'm a roots rock blues artist from New Orleans, Louisiana, and you're listening to Talkin Blues.
So I have to ask you, with the recent hurricane, how badly were you affected?
Not badly in so far as property damage or anything like that. Our apartment was fine, and I didn't lose any belongings. Of course, it knocked out power in the city for about a week, or give or take, because it came back on in stages. Um, So, I had evacuated up to my mom lives about like 3 hours away from New Orleans in central Louisiana. So we evacuated up there. So it was a little bit of a disruption in so far as, just having to cancel some plans and throw out everything in the refrigerator and all that, but nothing too bad, thankfully.
But you have gone through worse situations with hurricanes when you went through Katrina,
Yeah.
which I presume once you go through something like that, that makes you look at things differently.
Yeah, I mean, one thing is, I learned not to underestimate the power of what these storms can do, because there's sort of a human nature where you get warned about something so many times and then it doesn't happen. People tend to think, oh, they always say that, so I'm not going to leave or whatever. And it's random where the storms end up hitting, but in Katrina, it definitely showed that it can be pretty bad when it does hit. And yeah, in Katrina, I was living uptown New Orleans, not far from where I live now, and the apartment that I was living in took on about 4 feet of water inside. The apartment was actually raised up about 3.5 feet, so it was actually 7 feet of water from the
Wow.
ground. But and that water stayed for a couple of weeks before it was drained out of the city. So everything that I had, I lost at that time, and I actually was out of town on a completely unrelated trip. So I found out that the hurricane was hitting. I was already in Washington, D.C., and so there wasn't anything I could do to get back and even grab like a couple of guitars or anything. So it just all was just gone. And that definitely had a big impact on me. I mean, it was definitely a moment of starting over, that was forced upon me, you know.
When you lose, and I think you lost equipment, musical equipment as well as
Hmm.
studio equipment. When you lose things like that, when you lose everything basically of your
Yeah.
belongings, how do you cope with that? How does one deal with that?
It's interesting because at that time, watching it from afar, sort of being stuck far away from New Orleans and watching what was happening, I mean, I couldn't feel too sorry for myself when there were people standing on rooftops, trying to get rescued with helicopters. So it wasn't that I was sitting there going, "Oh, my guitars" or something like that. For the
Right.
most part, at first, I was just, you know what? I'm just glad that I'm not stuck there in this hellish situation that so many people are stuck in. Um, but the way that it impacts you to lose everything like that, I mean, for me anyway, again, it wasn't so much missing a particular object. It was just that the loss of identity, or, like I literally didn't even have the tools to be who I was,
Hmm.
and do what I did. So it was sort of not having anywhere to go other than just like a couch on, a family member's couch or something like that. And just sort of, not having anything to go back to. When you're an apartment renter and your apartment is destroyed, then that's just it. I mean, there's no, you don't go back and sort through the rubble and with the insurance company or whatever, you just don't have an apartment anymore or any things. So you're just sort of like, you know, living out of a suitcase and trying to figure out what's next. So I think that was really the bigger thing to contend with. It bummed me out to lose all that stuff, and that happened in stages as I sort of like would think, oh, I used to have this and I used to have that, and now I don't. But for the most part, I think it was just really the you know where do you go now? Just it totally changes. You don't have your own place, and you don't have the ability for at least a period of time to be who you are and do what you do. You're just sort of living in someone else's house, and which again, I've always been thankful for, that I had somewhere to crash and that I
Hmm.
had somewhere to go and that I wasn't stuck in the water or something like that. So I've always been thankful for, you know, um, that I didn't personally suffer any injury, or that I wasn't killed in the storm. And same as this last one with Hurricane Ida. I mean, I'm very thankful for, um, just the basics of just having a safe place to go during it. But yeah, Katrina was, that was definitely a moment where I had to figure out what was next. That was a given, because going back to normal wasn't a possibility. Um, and so it sort of definitely made me reevaluate everything at the time.
And part of that reevaluation meant that you were moving to New Zealand.
Yeah, and I know that's strange to a lot of people because they say, "Oh, that's a far way to go." But for me, I already had read some things about New Zealand, and it was sort of just this: oh, if I was to get away, I would go there. Um, the bad part about losing everything is obvious. You've lost everything. And the good part is, well, now you literally, you don't have to figure out what to do with all that stuff, or how you're slowly going to transition to something else. You literally just have to save up and get the plane ticket and figure out how you're going to, get over there and survive for a few weeks, and maybe find some other way of, getting by over there. So, I mean, it's sort of, I think, rather than figuring out how to save up money and come back and have an apartment in New Orleans at a time when the city was still just a mess, and it was, you know, trying, just trying to rebuild. Um, I was able to work toward a goal, and that kept me. It got me through it, really, because I ended up getting a job, at a law firm, like doing, you know, reviewing documents and stuff like that. And that in and of itself, um, going from playing music to just sitting at a desk, working at a computer, trying to save a little bit of money, it would have been kind of maybe depressing. But I was working toward this goal of, no, I'm gonna save up, and I'm gonna get out of here, and I'm gonna go somewhere else. And so it gave me a goal to work toward. And so it seems kind of far to go, and it was, but it, it it was the right choice for me at the time. It really, it sort of, I needed to feel that I wasn't restrained and sort of restricted in what my possibilities were. I really needed to like break outside of the box, or
How long did it take for you to make that decision? Because that's a big decision.
Yeah, it was fairly quick. Honestly, I think that I was in a sort of a shock and devastation type of thing, and just I was processing a lot of things, and I had made some online friends in New Zealand and had
Okay.
talked with them before, and I was asking them questions about the country and stuff like that. And this is before Facebook and all that. I think that they worked for a radio station, and I had talked with them before in that context, and was asking them questions about what's it like over there, and do you guys like Americans over there and stuff, because I really didn't know anything, and it's hard to remember. This was like 2004. I started talking with them, and at that time, you had the internet, but you didn't have uh, I still didn't have that much of a sense of the things the way you do now with social media, because you see everything that everybody's doing all day. But um, so I had kind of been talking with them. So when I was in this moment of, like, I don't know what I'm going to do next, they reached out and said, well, why don't you come over here for a while? And and I just kind of thought, yeah, why not? You know,
Okay,
so
so I presume you had a vague idea of what New Zealand was like.
yeah.
When you got there, how was it compared to the vague idea you might have had?
It was great. I mean, you know, it's kind of funny because it's very, I mean, it's a beautiful place and the people are really nice, and it was definitely, I felt pretty happy and excited about having achieved just getting over there, and you know that lasted for quite a while, and I still feel that way about it. I still have a really big love for New Zealand, and I still think it is pretty much everything that I thought it would be. I think the only things that you can't account for and that I wasn't able to account for is everything that I took for granted about where I had come from. So that's what started to eventually, come back up in my mind, is that sort of the musical context that I was used to in New Orleans uh, is is a big part of who I am, and it that's sort of the type stuff that I missed. If somehow I could combine it all together, I would. Because I miss so much about being over there, um, but when I first got over there, it was just going through walks and beautiful forests and beaches, and writing music, and it was great. And it really did alleviate some sort of uh, existential stress that I had on the idea that I was confined to um, a certain place, or just growing up and not coming from any money or anything like that, just feeling like you were going to sort of be trapped in some way or another. And I think getting over there, it sort of made me feel like, look, you're not as trapped as you think. You're able to do something like this. You're able to go, be living 8,000 miles from where you were born. um, for me, that was just an important experience, I think, to just kind of like blow off some steam and feel less confined.
I wonder, musically, like, were you going? You lost your equipment. I presume you did get something back before you went there, but how much did music play into what you were going to be doing in New Zealand?
Well, I think so. I had started experimenting a little bit more with this idea that, art um, didn't need to be, the music as art, that it didn't need to be concerned with whether it was real drums and bass or whether it was a band. I just wanted to think about the sound and the emotion that I was trying to convey. And so I had begun dabbling in electronics, um, and just sort of using samples and programming the sounds that I thought would work with the sound that was in my head. And so the the break that I had with everything that I had going in New Orleans and the musicians that I was playing with and deciding to go overseas, it sort of went along with the idea that, okay, I'll just create music with myself and with a computer, you know, and it's hard to really decouple those things, because the idea in my head that I was going to be able to continue making art by myself, whether or not I met musicians that I really clicked with or not, that was a big part of how this was all going to work out. You know what I mean? Um, yeah, I wasn't going over there going, well, I just sure, I hope I meet the right musicians so that I can play. Otherwise, I don't know how I'm going to make music. I was very much in my mind going, I'm going to make music by myself. I'm just going to create music. Um, and not worry about it being a band or whatever. So that, you know, and again, it's really the polar opposite from what I'm doing now. Um, because I definitely came back to that human element of wanting to play with other people and wanting to play organically. But at the time, I think it was a coping mechanism combined with an interest. I mean, I do find it fun, and I always have to play with drum machines and stuff like that. But it definitely combined with this is how it's all going to work. This is how it all makes sense. Uh,
I presume that that also served you well during the pandemic.
it did, and I found a way to work that into my current, more organic, outlook on things with the covered tracks records
Hmm.
that I just put out, and the way that those records came out, I started doing a live stream and I was just doing bluesy stuff, and then I picked up a looper pedal just to kind of keep it interesting to me. So I started scratching out some rhythms, and then I'd play over that and maybe put a little rhythm guitar down and solo over that and stuff. And people started saying, "Hey, I want to hear something like this. Like I like your records with the more rock band kind of sound, but like I want to hear this stripped down acoustic stuff." And so by recording those and using some of those skills that I had from recording my other stuff by myself, um, I was able to sort of have fun with that, and in the context of more bluesy stuff.
I love the songs that you chose. I mean, I don't know them all, but a lot of those
Yeah.
songs that
Oh,
you
thank you.
chose are songs that I grew up with. And whether it be 2564 or Can't You See or whatever, I mean, these
Yeah.
are songs that are near and dear to me. And you do such a great job with them, and
Oh,
with
thank
so
you.
little, so little, meaning just yourself. And I really, really enjoyed those.
Thank you.
So I
Yeah. I mean,
guess,
it was fun.
how did those songs come to you? Was it requested? I mean, obviously it was inspired by the streaming, but how did you come upon choosing those songs?
It was kind of a mix. So I asked for requests from fans, in the mailing list and stuff like that. So I got a fair amount of requests, and then I had some songs that had meant something to me at one point or another, and that represented all the different things I had been into over the years. Um, and so I sort of just and I also was sort of trying to do this in a timely way. So it's, I kind of, things just sort of rose to the surface. I had a few that were kind of going around in my head. And then when I was listening through the requests, a couple of things jumped out at me, like, "Oh, I Wept," and stuff like that I wasn't really familiar with. I had heard of the band Free and, and stuff like that. And then, 25 or 6 to 4. Same thing. I'd heard it, but then when I was listening to it again, I was like, man, this is sort of oddly appropriate for the pandemic as well. Just that kind of feeling of just being inside and just like, I guess I'll do this now. I guess I'll try this. I don't know. Um, you know, so just things just kind of rose to the surface, and I ended up, narrowing down a list of about 20 something songs. And then I was just kind of thinking, well, you know, maybe I'll make it 2 volumes rather than one. Um, and part of that is just kind of trying to keep things going while waiting and seeing what happened, what was going to happen with the music industry and everything. So it kind of gave me something to work on, without too much expense or anything, just recording at home. And it was cool. It was very fun to get to do that again, because you know for the last couple of studio records that I did, under my own name, with the sort of power trio type thing, um, they were a little bit more, they were more electrified, and I was working with different engineers and stuff, but I enjoy kind of getting hands on with it and mixing and all that. So it gave me a lot to do, which was good.
We kind of started in the middle. So can we just go back to the beginning?
Hmm.
I know you started playing music very early, and I know you were playing in the bars like at the age of 14, 15, or whatever. But how did music first come into your life?
I don't really recall it not being a big part of my life. I think I was always drawn to music. even as like a toddler, I would ask my mom to put on certain records, and I would dance around, and I started playing air guitar, and I just really wanted to play guitar, and I was asking for a guitar. And I don't remember a lot of this because it was too young. I finally got my first guitar when I was 5, and really couldn't do much on it at all. But I it just always was there, and there was never really a thought that I would do anything else. Um, and not that I'm not interested in other things, but that was always my, the center of my focus. And then I was lucky enough to have a mom that was cool enough to take me to some concerts, and an older sister that would introduce me to music. So when I was too young to even know how to find music, my older sister was listening to MTV and stuff, and like seeing some of those late 80s, early 90s bands and going to see them live in concert. And then, so having the arena rock experience when I was in grammar school, that really solidified it. I mean, they were like superheroes, and I was just like, this is definitely what I have to do
Okay,
with
can
my
you give
life.
me some
So,
examples of who those superheroes would have been?
oh, I mean, I saw Poison, I saw Motley Crue, I saw Guns N' Roses, I saw Metallica several times. Um, you know, I'm trying to think of who else. I mean, Soundgarden in the early days, and um, so I mean, but Bon Jovi, I think, was one of my first concerts. I was seeing Bon Jovi when I was maybe 6 or something.
Okay,
So
so a lot of these are classic rock bands, right?
I guess, yeah. I mean, they're 80s. I guess. I mean, when I was growing up, classic rock was like the late 60s stuff. But I
Right,
suppose
right,
now
yeah.
that's classic rock. Yeah.
So, and when you started playing in bars at a young age in your teenage years, what were you playing? What kind of stuff? Was it that kind of stuff?
No, it was blues. So I sort of when really when guitar started to click with me, I was sort of in a metal phase. Hard rock. The stuff that was on MTV, nothing super esoteric, just Megadeth and Metallica and
Right.
White Zombie and stuff like that. So that was I was into the riffing stuff, and but I would go see bands at there was a local restaurant pub that all ages could go see the shows, and I'd go and see bands playing, and the bluesy stuff. I always liked Jimi Hendrix. I always liked that stuff, and I would always like even guitar players that I was into. I got really into like the guitarists, the instrumental guitarists, the Satriani and Steve Vai and people like that. And these guys were always talking about Albert King and Freddie King and all this stuff. So I had gone and discovered some of that, and I started to get more into that. And then I think that combined with the fact of wanting to get up and play with some of these older musicians and seeing them jamming blues, and that first experience of like knowing a pentatonic scale enough to improvise in a blues context and just to be making it up, and that feeling, once I felt that, it's like it just opened up my understanding of what I was listening to. And so then when I would listen to BB King, Freddie King, all of these great blues guys, Buddy Guy, um, it just in my mind was just opened up to it in a new way, because I would feel what they were speaking with the guitar, and then I would want to learn the licks, and so by the time I really started playing live, about 14, um, it was blues. I was in a big blues phase by that point.
And are you in New Orleans at this point, or are you somewhere
Hmm.
else?
No, I'm in New
Okay.
Orleans right now.
So how important is New Orleans to your musical heritage?
I think it's a lot more. I see now how important it is in a way that I didn't see before I left and came back. Um, and the reason is, uh, musicians around here are able to play usually different styles, and they're able to play together and improvise. And that's a big commonality between jazz and funk and blues and zydeco music and, you know, um, a lot of the different styles, that are around here. And that ability to listen to each other in the moment and be making it up on the spot, and the small nuances being what's important. Whether you're talking jazz, funk, blues, whatever, it's the tiny little nuances and listening together, and it becoming this sort of um, sum that's greater than the parts, uh, and that thing is something that I sort of took for granted. So when I was doing rock music or whatever, there was always an element of improvisation. And a lot of the time, if I was playing with people from around here, we would be able to do that, and add that element into it. And it's something that I didn't realize until I maybe jammed with people that had just come from a exclusively rock music background, that were from somewhere else, where they were used to like learning songs and learning the parts and playing them that way, and it being sort of very by the book. And I realized, oh, that's not how I approach music. I'm you know I'm always interpreting it in the moment. And so that there's a lot of, even if I'm not doing a traditional style, there's so much about the feel of the culture, and just um, that sense of spontaneity and really listening to each other, that I think has had a big influence on me.
I wonder, when you first started recording, is it correct to assume that your first recording project was Sire?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that was released, I mean, I had 4-track tapes when I was growing up, and I was doing whatever, instrumental guitar stuff, with the drum machine, and coming up with guitar melodies and riffs. And that was the first stuff that I ever, I guess, put down on tape. The Sire stuff, it's funny because I had, spent most of my teenage years doing blues. Um, and then I really sort of, you know, I think it was Government Mule that I saw them open up for Buddy Guy, and I sort of remembered, I hadn't forgotten all the rock stuff I was into, but I'd sort of just gotten really heavily into this blues thing. And they sort of tied it all together. And I started moving in that direction, uh, of wanting to tie together the, different chords and different scales, but with that bluesy approach, and with the guitar solos that were from the heart, and, the improvisation and stuff. But I think that I just sort of also had all this other stuff going on, where I wanted to tie in the drum machines. I wanted to tie this in. And then the end result ended up being more rock than it was roots, I guess. And it, ended up being more progressive. Um, and to me, all that stuff, still, there's so much overlap, but it definitely ended up going right past the roots rock bands and all the way into the, progressive rock.
When it does that, does that matter to you? Because you're going by what feels right to you, and this is the direction that's taken you. So do you turn around at one point and go, oh wow, this is way more progressive than I ever expected it to be? Or, because I keep reading
Yeah.
about the comparison to Tool as
Hmm.
one of the things that seems to be there when they talk about Sire.
Yeah, I think that, and I think there was a Tool influence, but I don't think there was already elements there that I saw them putting together in a way that made sense to me, in that I was already into the Eastern scales, and that had come from way before, when I was listening to people like Satriani and Steve Vai and stuff like that. And I was always interested in the different types of scales, the different types of time signatures and stuff. But I think one thing that influenced me, uh, to sort of make weirder arrangements, is that I've always had a trouble hearing something as original. unless it's kind of weird, you know? And so it's like I can enjoy playing some rootsy stuff and playing a straight blues thing, and I can enjoy listening to it, but it's almost like it doesn't feel like a new song. So, and that's something I've had to struggle with, more recently. But I think when I was working on stuff where it was like, okay, it goes from, you know, 7/4 to 11/4 or whatever, and it's got this scale, and then it goes to this scale. It was like a way of breaking outside of, oh, that sounds like this other song, you know, because a lot of times if you just sit there and you start strumming some chords and you go where it naturally feels like it wants to go, then you go, oh yeah, that's that other song. Oh, I've heard a song that does that before, it's this. And I had a lot of trouble with that, in the early stages of my writing. I just, if it sounded like something else to me, then I would immediately shut it down. Now, the irony is that the sound as a whole, as you say, people would compare that to other bands, but sort of the way that I got there was going, well, this chord change doesn't remind me of anything, or you know, it's
Right.
it's sort of, um, and so I think that element, that tradition versus innovation, there's it's a tricky thing because, for the most part, when something sounds familiar, traditional music, there's an element of it that's going to sound familiar. And so when you're writing a new song that's a new blues song or a new, um, country song or whatever, there's some element that's familiar,
Right.
because otherwise, why would you call it blues? There's got to be some element that is what you expect. But then you also want to do something that's not what you expect. And I, in the early stages of my writing, I very much was always trying to do what you don't expect. Um, and so that led it to being more progressive.
How well did that band do?
Not very well, but I think it was, I mean, honestly, it was very little of a band. It was sort of like something that I wanted to become a band, but in the meantime, I really wanted to make the music, and I was trying to, discover what I was trying to do. And so I was always making the stuff, and I was so used to. I've never been good at sort of sitting around and waiting till I meet the right people. I'm going to be making stuff, and I'm going to be sort of having a vision of how I want things to be. Um, so by the time, I would have this music, and then I'd be looking for a drummer to play it, basically. But I always wanted it to become more of a band. It just never really did. So, I sort of, I worked with a couple of different great drummers, and, you know, uh, I had a few different bass players that cycled in and out. And, you know, it just never really became something where it was a bunch of guys that wanted to get in a van and go sleep on floors and, you know, eat peanut butter sandwiches and try to tour the country getting this rock band off the ground. And honestly, I don't know that there's another way to get a rock band off the ground, because if you don't have like a group of people that are willing to make zero money and practice 3 times a week so that all these crazy arrangements together, um, then I don't know how it works, So it basically just, it was a project.
But that was the goal. Is hopefully one day it will become a band and you would go
Yeah,
tour.
yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, based on what I saw on the internet, there's obviously a bit of a following, and people were talking about the band. How did that How did that get out there? How did people know about the
Well, I
band?
think, I mean, it's sort of a slow burn of, just the music being out there for a while and people discovering it and passing it to each other and everything. You have to have that critical momentum to get something off the ground in a way that you can actually get the ball rolling on, to get it on the road and actually go out there and make it a real thing and be touring. That never really happened, but the music being passed around has definitely, um, definitely sort of happened, on a cult following level. Yeah, there's definitely people that are still into it.
Is there ever a possibility that you will go back to that?
I mean, I honestly, it would have to be if it just made sense to me. I mean, honestly, I find what I'm doing now to give me more freedom and expression. Um, but I still like heavy sounds. I mean, there's nothing that I stopped liking about heavier music. I still can dig that, and it can be fun to play. But I just don't get as much enjoyment out of just sort of the scriptedness of writing songs that have these specific changes, and we have to hit these specific points. And um, it's sort of, I don't know, if there was a context to do it in, theoretically, but it's not really where my head's at the
Right.
moment.
Okay. But I am curious because I tend to like progressive rock. And
Mm,
as I get older, I seem to not go back to it all the time, but it's there for me,
yeah,
and I guess I do go back to it. And I find it intriguing that I love the blues and there's a certain rawness to it. But there's something about the technicality and for me, a lot of great progressive rock has great melody. There's something very
yeah,
catchy about things. Wow, there's so many crazy things going on, and
yeah.
and Sawyer seems to have that element of the melodic side of things. And I think part of it is also your vocals, which you have. You got a great voice, and it's interesting when I review, your acoustic stuff versus your bluesy stuff versus your progressive stuff. I mean, the one constant is your voice, and it's like, wow, that works in every genre, which is really neat.
Oh, thanks.
But from your point of view, and I know you said you're not into it now, but when you were into it as somebody who wrote progressive music, what was it that you loved about it?
Well, I think that the difference comes down to what is the art form, because a lot of things can be classified as music, but I feel like with the progressive stuff, the art is really in the construction and the writing, and with the rootsier stuff, the art form is largely in the performance. It's not in the construction. So I feel like with the progressive stuff, what I really liked about it is finding some strange, you know little riff or motif that would work with some beat that you wouldn't have thought it worked with. Something that was kind of off of that a little bit, or trying to make something in a weird count like 7 or 11 or 9, trying to make something like that groove to where you're not thinking, you're not having to count it. It seems to make sense, and yet it's in this odd timing. And just by setting that parameter of going, okay, let me write something in 7 or whatever, um, it it would give you like a challenge, like a puzzle to work out, and that was fun. Um, then when it comes time to perform it, you're sort of just recreating the piece. You're
Right.
recreating the art that you constructed. And I think that that's where, for me, um, it just depends where you want the real creativity to happen. Because with that type of music, the creativity is happening in the creation of the music. uh, the performance is sort of just um, portraying. It's just recreating what you created. Whereas with the bluesier rock stuff that I've done, the creation of it is really just a skeleton of an idea. The original composition, there's not much to it a lot of the time. It's sort of a um, it's just a sketch, and the real creation happens in the moment. When you're really just going out there, and sometimes you might stretch out a section and take it in a whole new direction, and it's just uh, so for me, that's more exciting because it means that every night when I go up to play the songs, that is the creative process right there on the stage. I'm creating everything that's happening. All the little licks that I do in between things, I'm able to come up with that on the spot. So I really just think it's a matter of, you know, the art form. What is it really about? And I think with the electronic stuff and with the progressive stuff, the art form is in the studio creation and the writing. And with the bluesy stuff, the art form is the performance and the expression of it.
And somewhere in between is another project of yours called Empty Self.
Hmm.
Tell me about that.
Empty Self was sort of inspired by a little bit softer of a sound for the most part. A little bit more acoustic driven stuff. Um, but it was also just inspired by the idea of this sort of synesthetic thing where I wanted to sort of make the sounds that I imagined in my head. I wanted to make a sound that sounded like the emotion felt rather than going, well, here's your instruments. You've got guitar, bass, drums, whatever. This guy's going to play this guy's going to play this. Instead of that, it was just this sort of, if I'm looking at a mountain, what does that sound like? So it was more about sound design and um, just really, it's more introspective. It's from a more internal place, a more meditative place, uh, without reference to the band format.
And when does that idea come to you? Is that while you were still in New Orleans? Is it when you're in New Zealand or?
It came to me while I was still in New Orleans, and I was still trying to get the Sire thing to be a band. Um, but I had written a couple of songs that just I don't know. I I had sort of started just experimenting with a different sound of like acoustic guitar and drum machine and stuff, and it was just and singing a little bit lower and a little bit softer, and just it just was coming from a different place, um, and so I just sort of what I liked about it is that you know, I didn't have any ambitions that it was going to be a band. So it was just purely, it was almost like recording a remix, or something. It was like something that would have been a remix of a rock band song or something like that, because I wasn't thinking about how's this going to be pulled off live ever. I was just doing whatever I wanted to do with the studio tools I had. And so it was just, I just enjoyed experimenting in that way. So it started in New Orleans, and the first Empty Self record that came out actually like 3 months before Katrina, and then when Katrina happened, I sort of was like, well, then I'll just do this project because this project I can take with me anywhere. This project is in my backpack, so um, I loved the idea of just like putting on headphones in an airport and being and working on music. And, um, you know, so it started a little bit before that, but it very much became the answer for me. When I lost everything in a storm, it was like, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to be more of an electronic songwriter.
And do you think? I mean, it's interesting because when I look at your different stuff between the progressive to the atmospheric or the blues or the acoustic, I mean, I just get this feeling that you would be doing these things anyways because this is what you want to do, or you get an idea and say, I want to do this because I
Mm.
can. How often do you think, in terms of the commerciality or the future of it, is it more about doing it because you just feel like it's the way, as opposed to saying, yeah, this might be a way for me to make money, or this might be a way to gain more fans? What's the motivation, I guess, is the question.
Well, I think the thing that I enjoy doing the most is that electrified live band performance, um, and with the emphasis on the improvisation and stuff. There's something about it's like surfing or something. Not that I know how to surf, but it's sort of it's sort of like when you're playing this big note and it's kind of feeding back and you're experiencing it at the same time as the audience, and you don't always really you don't know what you're going to do next, and it's sort of this thing that um, takes you outside of yourself, and that's what I enjoy doing the most. And in order to do that, you need to be able to have an audience, and you need to be able to have a place to do that, and you need to have an audience that understands what it is that you're trying to do. So you have to find that audience. And so I wouldn't say I'm certainly not motivated by you know anything very commercial, obviously, or I'd be trying to make pop music or country hits or something like that. Um, but you do kind of go, okay, I don't want to be in a box, but I do want to be able to find that crowd that understands this. And so, to a certain extent, um, you know, I think that there's an element of the blues audience that understands that sort of live improvisation, speaking through your instrument and trying to go another place. I think there's a lot of the jam band crowd that understands that. Um, and, because it's definitely not top 40, I can say it's definitely not about hooks and hits, you know. And of course, no one would hate having a hit that allows them to, buy a house or something like that. I mean, who's going to not like that? But it's certainly not something that's not really. Um, I just I can't somehow get myself to focus on that, because what I really want to do is that experience, and be able to stretch out and have that experience with the crowd. So I do think about how to not be so all over the place with music, because I am into a lot of stuff, and you do kind of have to figure out how it's going to find an audience that understands what the hell you're doing, and that you're not sort of you know losing people with a song that's radically different than the last song that they heard, or uh, just figuring out how to do that balance of familiarity with unfamiliarity, or um, to where you can make people feel like they're immediately connecting with what they're hearing, but then you're able to take them in another direction. So I'd say I think about that more, than the commercial aspect of it. As far as the commercial aspect of it, my goal is, just to be able to do it, really.
So when you were in New Zealand and you decided there are certain things about home that I miss, I presume at that point when you decided to come back, part of your decision of which way you were going to go musically was decided for you. Is that a correct thing to say?
Yeah, I mean, when I first came back, I actually thought I'll do all the things. I'll start the hard rock band up again, and I'll play guitar for people, and this and that. But I found myself, just going out and hanging out and seeing music and connecting with people who were playing in the scene. A lot of them were playing in funk bands and sort of like jazz funk and different things. And I started, people would ask me if I was available to play this or that gig, and I would just do it for fun. And I was making a little bit of money to get by with, but just playing with brass bands and whoever, and Zydeco and whatever it was, and really I was just soaking it all up, um, but it did sort of take me in the direction of um, focusing more on what was happening, here, like the local culture. Whereas before, I had sort of made my own little bubble. I sort of broke out of that bubble and would just allowed myself to sort of be more influenced, and um, rather than just working on my own projects. When somebody, um, would call me to play a gig that was brass based funk music or whatever, and I went and played that, and it wasn't really about guitar. I mean, you do some soloing and stuff, but like for the most part, it's about the whole ensemble. Um, and so yeah, it did kind of naturally pull me in that direction. Um, playing like Cyril Neville at the time needed a new guitar player, and that was a big thing because I really, really loved his voice and was a big fan of the Neville brothers, and, you know, and that just being able to have a link with that sort of musical heritage of New Orleans and learning more about it and everything, um, it sort of put the other stuff on hold for a while because, I was just living in the city and playing music that was way more New Orleansy, so to speak, than the stuff I had done before, and you know it was it was just real. You know what I mean? I don't know how to say it. It wasn't up in my
Sure.
head. It was out here in the world, and that was a big difference.
What would have been the greatest lesson you learned from playing with Cyril?
Um, probably just just to listen to the space and the rhythmic aspect being really important. um that's something that's a big difference between like funk guitar, like the meters and stuff like that, from rock guitar, is it plays a much more percussive role. And getting that right and sort of real being able to feel that groove with the band, and that sort of on a playing level um, was a big thing. Um, but it's hard to say. I mean, I think he's just inspiring as an artist and as a singer. Um, and I think to be able to play with a singer like that, and just to, I don't know, really feel more connected with the heritage of New Orleans, and the stuff that was very New Orleansy, very headline jazz fest type of stuff. Um, that that sort of made me have a new appreciation for it that I might have not had, before, when I was sort of doing rock stuff, and I sort of took for granted all the New Orleans stuff. But it really made me feel it. Why does this sound like the city? Why is this the stuff that we all celebrate in the city? And what does it say about the way of life and stuff like that?
So the fact that you've played with a lot of people from New Orleans, including Cyril, and you also played and toured with Tab Benoit, who also has a great tradition in the Louisiana music
Hmm.
scene. Do you feel like you're now part of that? I mean, or is how important is that to be part of that lineage of the Louisiana music scene? Is that something that you're consciously aware of, or is that something you don't even think about?
I mean, I am kind of aware of it, and because you do kind of want to tell your honest story, and the talk about the places that you really see and that you've really lived, and the things that you've really gone through and everything. And not to say, I've never been a person that writes songs that are just about stories about imaginary other people. Like, I've never really done that. Now, I may use metaphors of, you're talking about crimes or something, and you're not really committing crimes or whatever. Uh, but it's always my life, But I used to write just on a more philosophical angle, and now I sort of feel like it's important to provide some of that imagery of what actually surrounds me, and what actually, um, the place. itself. And I want to be part of that lineage, of Louisiana music, even if I'm not the most traditional Louisiana artist. But I think part of it is just, everybody's got their reality and their story, and sometimes um, there's just by telling the truth about what your life is and the things you see, you don't really even know all of the stuff that might be in there for someone else to discover. That's the great thing about sort of being honest with music, is that um, you know you're there might be a lot more there than you even realize.
Mhm.
Um, just by depicting what your life is like, and there might be something that someone else is able to take from that. Um,
So if I was to ask you how you might have progressed or matured or changed between your first two solo albums, excluding the acoustic stuff, what would you say to that?
um, well, I think that a lot of it has been sort of trying to figure out what I actually enjoy doing and sorting that out, and how does that fit with, you know, what I'm driven to do artistically. Because um, there's definitely a part of me that if I sit down with an acoustic guitar or something, I might be driven to do some very introspective stuff. Maybe I'll do some quiet finger picking stuff. But is that the life I want to lead? You know, um, it's sort of, I've found myself especially earlier in my life, doing things that I would turn around and go, yeah, well, I don't really want to get up on stage and do that. You know, it, and that seems really weird to people, but it's not, because when you're sitting at home and you're playing with, your your toys at home, and you've got a drum machine and a synthesizer and a guitar, and you're doing what inspires you in that context. But there's a whole other context, which is at a festival on a sunny day, looking out over a bunch of people that are smiling and having a great time. That's a whole different context than like slumped over a guitar, in your studio. So it's sort of like, in that context, all of a sudden I want to do something different. But if I'm going to be in that context doing what I want to do there, I sort of have to think of that and create the environment to where that'll be what I'm able to do. you know so I think that a lot of what has changed with me, and what I've learned over the years, has been trying to put those things together, rather than setting out music and then realizing, well, that's not what I want to get up there and do once I'm there. You know what I mean?
But okay, but you released two great acoustic albums recently because of the pandemic, because of your streaming concert. Was
Yeah.
it difficult for you to think about releasing those? I mean, did you have some reservations about that? Because is that really what you want to do? I don't know.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's exactly. I mean, I really don't want to be the acoustic guy, where everybody just wants to book you as the acoustic guy to play early in the afternoon. You know what I mean? And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not really what I want to do mostly. And if you have to be careful if you keep selling a package that is not really ultimately what you want to do. You can find yourself, you know, putting yourself in a place that you didn't want to be. So, yeah, I am sort of, I did have concerns about doing the acoustic thing too much, because I just don't want to be pigeonholed as that. I want to be synonymous with a more electrified, band sound. When you see my name, I want you to think, oh, that's going to be, a louder, bigger thing. Like, so I didn't, I wasn't sure about that, but the flip side of that is that I feel like it allows you to, you know, connect there's only so many, slow, soft songs that you can put on a record if the main purpose of the record is the band. So I feel like it allowed me to show a little bit more of the softer side, and maybe connect a little bit more emotionally in that way. So there's definitely, um, ultimately I figured out that it would be worth it, and you have to just kind of trust that you're not confusing people.
And the other aspect is that it's both you. So there's nothing to say that you can't do a gig and in the middle of the set pull out your acoustic and play a couple
Yeah,
songs and then rock out again. Right? I mean, the fact that you can
for
do
sure.
this is, for somebody who can't do this, it's an amazing thing. So, that you can not only that, but I mean, just the idea is that if you decide that I want to record some of the sounds that I hear in my head, and then put a drum track to that, and put guitar to that, and then rock out doing a blues tune, and then just doing some nice acoustic tunes. I mean, it's pretty crazy that you have the ability and the facility to do all these things.
Right. Yeah, and I definitely think that um, it's crazy how just the pandemic um, forcing you know the live stream thing. Not that you're forced, but it was just like well, it's like, well, when's the next time I'm going to play if I don't get on the live stream and start doing this? And at first I thought, but that's not really my forte. And then of course, you know, people want to, they show up and they tune in and they want to hear it again and they want you to do it again. And then you kind of go, well, I guess, it feels good to do it and people seem to enjoy it. So maybe this is more my forte than I thought, just me playing by myself with an acoustic guitar. So it's, I'm definitely of the mindset these days that, uh, you do what you enjoy doing, and if people like it, um, then you shouldn't be overly critical of yourself to the point where you don't think you're good enough to do it, or you don't think that that's what your strength is, or whatever. It's like, well, compared to doing nothing, I sure do enjoy getting an acoustic guitar and playing. And if people like it, then it's like it opened up this whole new thing that I didn't think that I was really necessarily able to do. So yeah, I mean, I'm a lot more comfortable with it now, just over the last couple of years, or well, I should say, it hasn't quite been 2 years, but it
Yeah.
feels like it. But just over 2020 and 2021, now I have gotten some, gone out there and done some acoustic shows and stuff, and it's been really cool. And I that was not on my agenda before last year.
So, having done this, where do you see yourself going forward? And I know the world is still up in the air and who knows what's going on. And I don't know what the situation is like down there right now. But having released these two albums and having gotten the really positive feedback on your electrified albums, what are you seeing in the future? Does anything change, or do you know what direction you're going to go into?
Um, I definitely want to do another electric album. Um, I'm trying, typically, if you're playing live enough, then you can have ideas that are coming from that, and maybe from the jams that you end up doing at a sound check or whatever, and then maybe you get together and you do a little rehearsal or something here and there. With the way that the live music world has been going for the past year and a half, there haven't been enough of those times, and so I really am eager to sort of get in a room with some guys and like jam, um, and you know have a little more time than sort of being on the clock in a studio. Uh, so I'm sort of looking for a situation to do that, but at the same time, I'm writing riffs and songs and stuff. Working on that at home. But I sort of, my idea of the next thing I want to do is I want it to be a little bit more influenced in the moment and not be quite as pre-written when we get in the studio and stuff. So I'm trying to figure out a situation where I could go in with a little bit less scripted and, a little bit less written down, and maybe see if what we can come up with in the studio. But I definitely want to do another electric record, and really hope to be getting out there and playing more with the band and acoustic. I'm trying to book both things at the moment. It's been, it's been a step forward and a step backward, and everything just as we felt we were sort of getting into a different place over the summer. The Delta kind of came out and started canceling things again, and Jazz Fest was canceled, and it's hard to really say, are we on the verge of getting back to the way things used to be, or not? But I just sort of take it a day at a time, and try to do do what I can.
Do you set goals for yourself?
Um, I not very, not as clearly as I probably should. I'll set like artistic things that I want to accomplish, that I feel like maybe I haven't done as much of, like where it's like I sort of I want to have a little bit more sunlight in some of the stuff that I do, and that doesn't mean, happy-go-lucky stuff or whatever, but it's like, I think going through a lot of the things that I've gone through, we've all gone through in the past year, has really made it clear to me that music is often about healing people, and it's not just about expressing turmoil or angst or struggle that you're going through. It literally in that moment can be a healing thing for people. And so I want to get better about at that, that I want to be able to connect with that place a little bit more. So I'll think about things like that I want to sort of draw from. I don't really, I'm not so great about setting like 5-year goals or anything like that. It wouldn't be a bad idea, but I haven't, I've never really been good at doing that.
Well, Eric, I should cut this off, but thank you so much. It's a real pleasure meeting you.
Thank you.
As I said, one of my listeners suggested I talk to you, and I've been listening to your music and been really impressed with what you do. So I appreciate this time.
Thanks, man. It was a great conversation. I appreciate it.
Is there anything coming up that people should know about?
I have a live stream that I've been doing every Thursday on my Facebook page, 7 p.m. Central Time, and it's just a free hangout live stream, acoustic thing, and hopefully have some more band dates out there later in the fall and winter and stuff. But other than that, just stay in touch online, and I always love hearing from people, and drop by the live stream.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, man.